This podcast is brought to you by Consolidation Coach, the leading M&A consulting firm in the collision repair industry.
Hey there, it's Jason Stahl with another episode of Consolidation Nation. And guess what? I have the dynamic duo on today. I have Laura Gay, who is the CEO, head honcho, president of Consolidation Coach. And we have Matt DiFrancesco, who is the president and owner and CEO and the big man at High Live Financial. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, and you're fresh back from the Texas Auto Body Trade Show, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So today, guys, we're going to talk about building value in your shop. And I remember 20 years ago or so, a long time ago, a guy said, and I don't know if he was having a bad day, but he was a body shop owner. He said, a shop's only worth the equipment inside it. And that was before the consolidation craze and private equity and whatnot. And maybe he's right about some shops, but a lot of other shops have a lot of value in the eyes of private equity. So let's talk about building value in your shop. And I want to start off with, let's talk about who's going to exit their business. And if you think about that, it's like everybody is. At some point, you're going to be an exiter of your business. So let's talk about that first.
Sure. I mean, like you said, Jason, I think everybody's going to exit their business at some point. And, I think, most times we think about retirement. The one thing we don't think about or don't want to think about is death or disability. But there's also issues like divorce, where, there could be, a conflict between husband and wife. If there's other partners are involved, that can be an issue. Business disputes. And so there's a lot of different factors, but I really believe most shop owners really, it's in the back of their mind, like at some point I'm probably going to retire or leave or move on to do something else or pass it on to my family. But it's always in the back of their mind, and they're never thinking of it from the front. So they're basically, they're grinding, they're building their business, they're pushing cars through. And I think they all of a sudden get to an age and say, they look up from under the hood and go, holy crap, like, what am I going to do now? And they haven't really planned ahead of time for what that life's going to look like.
Yeah. So Matt, tell me, or you too, Laura, maybe chime in. If you have a shop today and you've done everything right and it's super valuable, there's room to grow, right? There's room to, let's say, like, you're not ready to sell yet, but you want to sell in the future. There's room to build more value, right? And or let's say your shop is not doing that great, and you see the writing on the wall and the sun setting on your business, and you want to inject some value in it to get the maximize the value, the sale when you end up selling. Let's talk about how to do that, building value in your business.
Personally, I think the starting point really is you've got to have a vision. You've got to begin with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey talks about. And that's really determining, like, what do you want your life and your business to be? All right. It's like having a GPS. If we're going on a trip, what's the first thing the GPS is going to want to know? Where are you going? Right? So we have to analyze, where do you want to go? And I think that's a step that many times, many shop owners and just business owners in general miss. And I mean, and I quote this statistic all the time, and people kind of look at me like, you're crazy. But this is they've done studies on business owners who have exited their business. It's the Exit Planning Institute does this every year, and every year consistently, it says 75% of business owners that leave their business regret it after the first year. And the only reason they regret it is their whole identity was wrapped around that business, and all of a sudden now they don't have it anymore, and they don't know who they are. And they don't know what they stand for. And they don't know what they're going to be working for from now. So I really believe the first step really has to be, we've got to create a vision, because you can build and build and build, but if you don't have a foundation of where you want to go, the building's going to collapse. So that's the first step. And then the second step is really kind of identifying where you are. And I think, we got to look at really in two different areas. We got to look at your business value and cash flow. And then the second area is really, what do you have in personal assets? And then tying that into the vision, what do you want your life to look like, and what kind of income is that going to need? And are you going to be able to do it? And a lot of times there's a gap that's there. And so with that gap. Now we got to figure out how do we fill that gap. So that's really, I think, where building value in the business comes into. And then now we know, okay, what are the, we know we need to build this much value into the business. What do we need to do to achieve that? So I really believe that sometimes we put the cart before the horse, and we really got to figure out the vision and then determine where we are to really effectively start to come up with a plan on how we're going to build the value in the business.
And I'd just like to tag on to that, just a couple of things. Um, Definitely, I see sellers of their body shops over and over putting the cart before the horse. There are many people that sell without guidance and without help and without somebody like myself and like somebody like Matt, that basically helps you through the whole entire journey and make sure that you don't have to be a Walmart greeter or go work at the Bucky's car wash post sale. I see them like they just get offers and then they're like, oh well, this sounds good. It's $1.5 million. I can live my best life on that. And then, keeping it real, $1.5 million is a lot of money, but for the rest of our life, it's not.
Yeah.
So and the other thing is when you just accept whatever is offered to you and maybe you negotiate a little bit, there's always money that's left on the table if this is not what you do every day. Whether it's in the sale price or the terms or the lease or the terms or the tax allocations, or many other facets, but those are the high level places that I see people leave money on the table. And then lastly, I know Matt always says that, that 70% of the people regret selling their business. I can tell you of over the 100 folks that I've helped sell their body shops, not one has regretted it. So I'm not saying, hey, I'm not running around saying, hey, let's sell your body shop. But I will tell you, I've never had a client ever regret selling their body shop. I think, and it seems like lately, the more that I talk to body shop owners, I feel like they are just really at an all-time low as far as like stamina and strength and willingness to fight the fight every day. I just think that they're just so broken down. Many of them are, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of them are so broken down from the nonsense. And if you follow any of the, I'll call industry leader regional MSOs and even industry leader single shops, on social media. I mean, just yesterday I saw somebody talking about some nonsense with State Farm, and it's just it's insanity. These shop owners are really struggling and fighting a fight that's just very difficult. If you're trying to do things right, the fight is a very difficult fight.
Wow, and I will say probably a lot of reason why, Laura, you don't get that is probably because of the process that you follow. But I just to give an example of what I was talking about, I was in Chicago back in February, and I was talking with a shop owner who had sold a year before. And he was verified. He was telling me, he goes, yeah, I sold the shop and I was all excited. And he goes, and then like I spent the first year, like I was playing golf and I was doing this, but I was bored and I didn't really know what to do. And I was explaining the process. And he said, boy, I wish I would have met you beforehand to help develop this vision. So I think what your experience is speaking to your process too. So I think there's a real benefit to the process that you're following with the shop owners, because I think other shop owners that I'm meeting that have exited like this and not used you are experiencing sometimes that regret.
Thank you, Matt, for that.
So let's talk about specifics, guys, with value. We talked about creating a vision and not putting the cart before the horse, but let's talk about specifics. Is value culture? Is value employees that have been with you a long time and are going to stay there after selling the shop? Is it just pure gross sales? Is it insurance relationship? Bullet point for me what the value elements are in a shop.
Well, first off, I think what we'll do is I'm going to give you the top view of what is value. All right. And value, bottom line, is really what somebody is willing to pay you for your shop. Okay. It doesn't matter. You can think about your house. People say, well, my house is worth this. Why? Because I got a Zillow estimate, or a real estate, a real estate agent told me that this is what it was. Guess what? Nope. It's only as valuable as somebody's willing to pay for it. So the bottom line is that's what value is. Now, there's a lot of factors that can increase that value to an outside an outside third party, or even to a family member or to key employees. And so I'm gonna let Laura kind of talk, just kind of bullet point some of those out.
Thanks, Matt. I'm just going to hit the high level things. The biggest things are, sales, annual sales, your adjusted EBITDA. And I think it's important to take a moment and talk about adjusted EBITDA, and that there's many ways to figure out what that number truly is. And taking the time to accurately figure out what that truly is a very key element. And I think a lot of people don't do that, especially during the selling process. Square footage of your shop, iCar Gold, being DRP centric versus being non-DRP centric. Those shops have a very different value. The ones that are DRP centric in the current landscape are much more desirable and definitely more valuable. I would say those would be the high level things, and there's probably 10 or 15 other little things. Another would be population. One of the big key factors now is used to be the consolidators and buyers were really after shops that had 10,000 population, and now it's really where if it doesn't have a 30,000 population in that city, it's not really something that's going to be desirable. So I think consolidators have become a little more discerning, and we're in a market right now that the consolidators are definitely still buying, and some still as aggressive as they were a year ago, and some that are just a little more discerning and a little more picky. I think about it like when I go to the grocery store and there's a hurricane coming. I'll take whatever grapes and oranges and vegetables I can get. But let me just tell you, if I go to the grocery store right now, I'm very picky about all of the fruit and such that I buy because it's plentiful. It's just it's for lack of better words, a give and take, if you know what I mean.
All right. So, and I'd like to also say that again, some of these things, again, the value is really in the eye. What does it say? The beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, and the value is really in the eyes of who the buyer is. So, for example, maybe you're looking at an internal transfer to either a family member or key employees. Maybe being non-DRP would make that shop much more valuable. Again, culture of the shop could be something that could make it more valuable to that outside buyer. So again, I think the thing to realize is it's not always a number. Beauty is always in the eyes of the beholder. We're always going to look at it from that third party standpoint because that's going to give us kind of the baseline to basically guide. But again, if you're doing an internal transfer, like let's say to family members, the IRS is going to allow you to utilize a discounted value, which can make it much easier for the kids to start buying into the business. But you got to have a starting point, and I think the easiest starting point is looking at it from the type of valuation that Laura's going to do for a shop to see what a third party buyer what the value would be to that third party buyer.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think it's important to understand a lot of folks go and get business valuations, just inherently from their accountant because, typically that's where you see a lot of people just kind of automatically go is to their accountant. And what's unique about how I do my valuations is that, yes, I'm doing it how an accountant's going to do it, but then I'm also looking at it from, a market perspective and also my personal experience perspective. So, we're looking at it from 3 different lenses, for lack of better words, to help you have a better understanding of what the value of the shop is. I did a valuation for a shop yesterday, and the valuation said the shop was worth $650,000. The shop is really worth 1.7 to 1.9 million. Like I know that that's what we can get for the shop. Their profitability hasn't been the greatest, it was just one of those things where there was quite a disparity, and that's where for lack of better words, you can kind of get caught up in. If you're thinking about selling your shop or even, on the journey trying to work through making a plan, it's really important to understand what drives all the different things, especially in the current market and beyond.
Guys, my next question reminds me that watchers out there, listeners, if you haven't been reading Body Shop Business, the print magazine, or bodyshopbusiness.com, Matt and Laura are creating great content a lot of articles on consolidation and succession planning and whatnot. And so this next question, I already know the answer to, because I read your articles and I edit them and everything else, but everyone else should be too. If you don't want to listen to a podcast or watch podcasts, go to the website. But we've got it everywhere. But essential owner versus incidental owner. And I believe this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, this will prove if I've been listening to you or not. Consolidators value a shop that can run by itself and the owner isn't involved. Did I get that right?
You said it correct, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, so explain to me the difference between essential owner and incidental owner.
Matt, I'm gonna let you take that one. You just did an awesome job on that one.
That's yeah. So basically, you know, and it's funny because yes, a consolidator does, but I think a third, you know, an insider also values that too. So basically, what the difference is. So an essential owner is basically means that it is essential that you're there for the business to function. If you're not there, the business will start to dive and fail. Okay. An incidental owner is somebody who has developed a business that can function without them. If they decide to go and spend a month in Europe, they could go do that, be disconnected from the shop, come back and find it still functioning and most likely growing. Okay, so that's kind of that's basically where that you know, the other way to, I guess, to phrase it is, are you an operator or are you an owner? So, I mean, I had a client who would always complain to me that I never have time to work on the business. And I said, that's your problem. I said, you're not going to get to the point where you want to be as long as you're working in the business all the time. And, you know, I'm a real big proponent of teaching what my coach has taught me, that we have tactical times where we need to work in the business. We've got to be doing the physical stuff in the business, but we also need to be separating out time that we're working on the business. Bigger picture. Where do we want to go? Working on that vision. What do we want our lives to look like? What do we want our families to look like? What do we want to do for our employees? What kind of culture do we want to build? And then we also need our renewal time. And that's time just to get away, just to disconnect, which is we need to recharge. And I think the bigger our businesses get, the more we need to recharge. So that's essentially the difference between the essential owner versus the incidental owner. Now, and I know Laura's going to speak to this about it from the third party aspect, but I want to just talk about it from the insider aspect. And I get a lot of shop owners who come to me and says, well, you know, my kids aren't interested in the business, and my key employees aren't interested in buying the business. I don't have any other options except selling. And it's actually interesting because then as we start doing the deeper dive and, you know, helping them to develop this deeper vision, you know, all of a sudden I see that no, they're stuck on the hamster wheel. They're working in the business all the time. And I tell them, I said, well, no wonder nobody wants this. Your kids they don't want that kind of lifestyle. I said, but imagine if we could get you to a point where all of a sudden, you know, we've delegated a lot of your responsibilities. We've empowered your employees to be able to take that. You don't have to be there all the time and you can work on high level stuff. Do you think that's something that might appeal to your kids? And all of a sudden it's like, that makes sense. Because the next generation, it's not that don't want to work hard, but they don't want to just be grinding, you know, they've watched their parents, you know, grind their noses on the grindstone for so long that they have no noses. Okay. And, you know, they've been through a lot of, you know, things like, you know, 2008 terrorist attacks, school shootings, the Great Recession of 2008. And they've watched all these things and they're like, look, you know, I don't mind working, but I want to have lifestyle too. Okay. And so wouldn't it be cool if you could develop a business that you could build mini retirements into? I mean, that's how I've developed my business. I build mini retirements into it, and I'm planning my retirement plan's face down on my desk because I love what I do, and as long as I'm mentally and physically capable of doing it, I'm going to continue to do it. But I wouldn't be able to do that if I couldn't take those periods where, you know, I grind out for 6-8 weeks and then give me 2 weeks, two or 3 weeks to go travel to Europe, to, you know, take the kids to Disney or, you know, whatever your dream is to do. So that's really, I think, the big difference. You know, as an incidental owner, you have freedom, okay, within your business. And as an essential owner, you don't. You're just a slave. You basically bought yourself a job.
Matt, that was absolutely on point. And I can tell you that, I've been in the collision industry now 34 years. I realize I'm totally telling on myself. But back, even the day when I had my stores, they were in Maryland. And I can think of a gentleman when I was an insurance adjuster before I even owned my stores. He would work like 80 hours a week, and his kids are younger than mine, or younger than me rather, but older than my son, and they don't want anything to do with the business. And he's very much about, being involved, being in the grind. Like, he feels like if he's not there, if it's like his name, his everything, and his shop is named after him. And I get that, but we have to modernize our way of thinking. And just because you have been this way your whole life and this is the way you run your shop doesn't mean that you have to continue doing that. You can certainly change your whole mentality. It can still be, Laura's Body Shop or whatever, but it's just going to be where it's going to be driven by your dreams and your goals with other people acting upon those. And I think that's a really key element, because I think when I talk to shop owners, a lot of times when I tell them, hey, you can change how you run your business, you don't have to sell. You've got a great business. Is this really something you want to do? And when you get them thinking about it, sometimes they're like, yeah, I'm out, I'm done. But some of them, like, they get excited and they get rejuvenated and they change their mentality and get some coaching and, change entirely how they run their business. And I guess that's what, Matt and I are trying to take home to everybody today. Yeah, the consolidator money is great. Yeah, that's awesome. But if you feel like it's something that you want to try to reinvent or try to figure out a better way, there are better ways. And Matt and I would love to try to help you figure all that out instead of just being forced or feeling like you're being pushed off of a cliff. Because I've had many, many sellers come to me and say that they feel like the industry's changed so much that they feel like they're just being shoved out of it and shoved off a cliff. And that's a terrible feeling, especially, when there's sellers that one called me the other day was 38 years old. I mean, he's got tons of runway. He's got different things that he wants to go do and things, but still, if you think about it, that's kind of a sad situation that we're in, as an industry.
Oh yeah, and if I could just share a story. So it's one of my very dear clients who, we started working together. Two sons were in the business, but they weren't passionate about it at all. They felt like they are more out of obligation, and we were starting to look at different strategies for him to transition what he wanted to do. And I actually remember I actually sent him to Laura. Laura did a valuation on the shop. And I remember we sat at lunch and we were reviewing these numbers, and he was like, he saw the numbers, and he saw especially what he would get on his real estate, and he's like, wow, that's really appealing. But I keep thinking about the old Camaro I bought back when he was living in Arizona, he was in his 20s, and fixed up this Camaro, and he ended up selling it. And he goes, he said, to this day I still think about that Camaro. I said to him, I said, do you think that's what's going to happen with the shop? And he was like, what I really love doing? I really love building the culture, and I like building up my employees. And so, to make a long story short, we're in the process now. We're starting to transition ownership over to his one son and his key employee. Ron's going to stay on and continue and just start to, but he wants to build a bigger vision. Okay, and help them to develop the culture, mentor them, help them to make sure that we have a culture that's going to help uplift and promote his employees. And so to me, that's a really cool vision. It's a really cool way to live your life. And it's a way that you can, you don't necessarily have to completely exit. You can still be a part of it, but on a different level. And then also your family and your key employees just can start to share in it. So that's just a real life example of one of the success stories out there.
Yeah. And another thing, Matt, you didn't mention, I don't do this aspect, but Matt absolutely does, is creating ESOPs. That's
Yeah.
another, especially if you've got a larger, maybe a small MSO or a larger single shop, that's doing larger sales with, higher EBITDA. that's always a really good option, especially for growth.
Now there's, you got to have a certain demographic to fit it. But if you don't fit, even if you don't fit that, there are other ways that we can create programs to help employee purchases, whether it's phantom stock, stock appreciation rights programs. There's a lot of different ways to do that. So the ESOP is a great tool. But it's not for everybody, but there's other options too if the ESOP is not the proper tool for you.
Well, Matt and Laura, thank you so much for your time today, being on the podcast. You guys complement each other really well. You have a lot of experience and advice to offer this industry. And let's face it, the average shop owner out there is 60 years old and examining their options, whether they want to move forward or not. So really appreciate your time today.
I appreciate you having both of you having me on. We just really want to get the word out to shop owners that there's people out here that are willing to help you to get the ultimate goals that you want. And sometimes you don't always know those. And like I've been working with a coach for 15 years, and I would not be where I am now without having that coach to help guide me, to help me to create a vision for what I want my business to look like, and then as I go through the steps to help walk me through, help to navigate the obstacles that are coming in. And I think that's really what both Laura and myself do with shop owners. So we're just looking to, bottom line, help families help shop owners create generational wealth for their families.
Thank you so much, Matt, for taking the time and joining me and being a guest on the podcast today. And Jason, you are spot on. Matt and I work so well together. We've been working together now. I'm not even sure how long it's been. It's probably 3 years now.
It's been longer than that. It's been closer to 4 or 5. Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun. But
That's right.
My point is that we worked so much together that, we kind of, for lack of better words, our processes that we have in place, we've tweaked them. So it's literally like a perfect bridge. You go from Matt to me, and then from me back to Matt. It's a perfect bridge without any hitches and get the giddy up. And it helps you again realize, from, hey, I'm starting to think about this, and putting your destination in and helping you get to the very end with the very, very best exit in mind. And again, Jason, thank you so much for having me on, and all the folks at Body Shop Business for all that they do behind the scenes. Thank you so much.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, guys. I'm Jason Stahl. Thanks for watching.